Joe's asking in the live chat about Oregon's chances of making the playoffs this year. And so I will let you two chime in on that. And then we can segue right into the college football playoff format that's been proposed and see what you guys think of that. So, Mike, in regards to Oregon's chances to make the playoffs this year.
So, yeah, playoffs is a very possible thing. To answer your second question, right now, no. I don't think Oregon can win it all in 2021. No. But can we make the playoffs? That's a whole different story. And that depends a lot on not just Oregon, but the rest of the conference. We did have that shortened season, so we didn't really get a full feel for how all these teams actually are. A lot of them kept most of their players. Washington's still really talented. USC is really talented. Arizona State's really talented. UCLA played really well last year. You just don't know what the conference is. And to make the playoffs, I truly think this year, because I'm chalking up pretty much a loss to Ohio State at this point. I don't think we can lose a conference game and make the playoff this year. So it depends on how strong the other conference teams are. Like Jaden Daniels could end up being a Heisman candidate for all we know if he plays well enough. Keaton Slovis could end up being a Heisman candidate for all we know if he plays well enough. It's not like the Pac-12 is as easy as a lot of people will make it out to be. It's a lot closer in parity than it seems. There's a lot of quality teams. It's just there's not that top caliber team who's beating everybody around the country right now.
I would agree with that. I think Oregon has to go undefeated to get there myself. I think that with the Pac-12
like
I just think with the Pac-12 the way it is, those last couple weeks, the national media starts throwing dirt on the Pac-12. It's just unless you go out with a bang. I mean, the year that Oregon went with Auburn, there were no questions. The year that they went with Ohio State, they got to answer the one loss that they had in the championship game. That might happen, I guess, but I think you need to win out your conference. I think you need to go undefeated in your conference, and in your non-conference, maybe they have a situation. Let's say Ohio State is just killing it, and they're the number one team in the country or number two team in the country, and they look fantastic. Well, then maybe that loss early in the season doesn't hurt Oregon as much, but I tend to think the way the national media is right now, it's very fickle, and the polls, I think, replicate that same exact narrative. And I just don't, from my perspective, I just don't see anybody in the Pac-12, even a USC media darling that they are, being at the end in those four. In week one, they're looking for one conference to throw out. They're going to do it every single. If you have 5 conferences and you only have 4 spots, they're looking for that one team to throw out. And that conference immediately off the top is going to be the Pac-12 in my mind. And I think the Pac-12 plays good football. I think it's very good. I think it's the parity is good out here. The balance of power is good out here. But for the average college football news guy in the country, they're not looking at the Pac-12.
I still think an 11-1 Oregon with a loss to Ohio State gets in, because like 2019, if we don't lose to Arizona State, we most likely make it in. We were the 6th team, right, and we were behind Georgia and Oklahoma, and they both just didn't have that extra loss that we did.
Right, and then you also need everything to fall. You need other losses in the country. So if teams are undefeated, then they're going. The way that it works, that I think that's the biggest push toward this 8-team playoff or 12-team or 16-team play. I don't know what the heck they're going to end with, but they're going to put a lot of teams into this thing. And I've always thought it's very simple. If it was a 6-team deal, you get one at large, all your conference champions go, you get one at large, give the first 2 teams a bye if they want, don't have to schedule it that deep, but they're going to make it into a deal where you're going to have extra games. They're going to make it you're going to have to win 3 games to win this thing now, it feels like. So I don't know. With the conference championships, the other bowls, there's a lot of discussions right now. I think so many people are so focused on the national championship. They're not really focused on anything else out there. I'm a little bit more of an old school guy, traditionalist, whatever you want to call it. I like the idea of a team like North Carolina getting to go to a bowl and have a win at the end of their season. Just because they didn't go to the national championship doesn't mean their season's a failure. I think there's a lot of that. You got to build for the next year. Not everybody gets to win a championship. There's one team. So I think we as a society have leaned a little too heavy on the championship or bust train. Even at Oregon, there's people who literally are excited about the season. As soon as Oregon loses one game, they're out. It's like, what? Well, you don't need to be doing that.
At the same time, in defense of the fans, like when the bowls come around, if they're not in one of those New Year's Six bowls, a lot of the times the best players aren't playing.
True. True.
So I mean, it's hard to get up for it when it's like, okay, your
Right,
backup quarterback, backup running back, and third string corner are
for
playing.
sure. And I support that move. I supported those guys
do as
opting out of last year. I mean, right off the gate, I talked with Brady Breeze the day he did it, and I was like, dude, it's the best move you could have made. You're not gaining anything from putting the 5 or 6 games on film last year, especially when you didn't get to play Ohio State. That was the one game you needed to put on film anyway. So, no, I think big picture, if the Ducks get to a Rose Bowl, they get to the national championship conversation, and anything can happen at the end, I think that's where you need to put yourself. I just don't think that Oregon has any right to say that they have a right to be there at the end when in the last, 5 or 6 years, the Pac-12 just has not shown up.
Like most groupthink national mainstream narratives, I do think that the Pac-12 being down is overblown. But I agree with Ryan. The conference has generally not shown up in big non-conference games, whether those be during the regular season or the postseason in recent years. But I don't think that to take what Mike said about the conference being deep and being strong with a lot of quality teams, not elite teams, but quality teams, I do think that you can take a huge portion of the Pac-12 and say these are all between 15 and 40 to 45 in the nation type teams. They're all going to go in the 6-6 to 8-4 range, and they're good teams. They could go to other conferences and finish 4th, 5th, 6th place in the conference and be really productive teams. But there's no, as of right now, Oregon's got the best chance, but there's no Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, i.e. Oklahoma, Georgia, etc. And until it's proven, and unfortunately, the Pac-12 has played less of those games in the non-conference, have less opportunity than the other conferences to show it. It seems like Oregon played that Washington played that Auburn game. Oregon played the Auburn game, and it was like, this is like, besides USC playing Notre Dame, this is like the Pac-12's only shot at showing anything, and then they lose a tough game, and then it's, well, let's put them away. That seems to be a little bit harsh for me. But again, this Oregon-Ohio State game is going to be monumental for the conference. Not that they have to win, but if, like Ryan depicted, if Ohio State's the juggernaut that they typically are, if Oregon goes out there and plays well and loses 35-28, and Ohio State just blows the doors off everybody else, then Oregon can say, and hopefully they will gain some respect for themselves in the conference that way. We've got UCLA taking on LSU at the Rose Bowl in week 1. That could be a key matchup for the Pac-12 to pull off an upset and show that it can do something. Washington goes to Michigan. That's another game. Stanford's got their typical run of difficult non-conference games. Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, and Kansas State. Those come to mind. USC, Notre Dame, of course. Also games that the Pac-12 can show. They can't win them all. They shouldn't be expected to win them all, but be competitive, win half of them, hopefully, and go from there.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting that first week, Ohio State at Minnesota, to start the Ohio State's year with a Big Ten team. Minnesota's been a pretty decent team as of late. They're on and off a little bit. They kind of fall apart, it seems like, at the end of the year, maybe here and there. But, that could be a year, let's go back in time to one of the greatest wins Oregon ever had, which was that at Michigan, right? That first year of Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator, Dennis Dixon. I mean, they're hiding the football. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. Well, most of that whole the storyline was lost because the week before they lost to App State. So the fact that Michigan came in so hot and heavy, they lose to App State, and then the next week Oregon blows the doors off them. Well, after that week to loss to App State, it was kind of expected, right? Well, what happens if Ohio State does not come out well in that first Minnesota game? I mean, maybe they get the win late. Maybe they struggle a little bit. Well, then now that game, that second week, it looks a lot different than if Ohio State just steps on the gas and blows Minnesota out by 30 or 40 in that first game. So again, I think the first week is always dicey. It's there's weird stuff can happen in that first week. I think by the second, third week, you figure out what your team has. But yeah, I think Oregon is in a situation where they have the prime game. They need to play well in this Ohio State game. Everybody's going to be on it. It's going to be an early game. It's going to be a 9 o'clock body clock for us out here because it's going to be the 12 o'clock start or whatever. It's going to come right off of the Fox thing. It's going to be the big game. There's going to be a lot of hype on that thing. If Oregon comes out and plays well in that thing, that could do a lot for the conference. But yeah, the Pac-12 just needs to win the games that are in front of them and do the things that are expected of them to do, like we expect any other conference to. When we see the SEC play these schools, we expect the SEC to win. So I think if the Pac-12 can turn it around, then Oregon has an opportunity to say, hey, we have a right to be there at the end because look at the conference that we run through.